Let's go ahead and call this Pompano Beach City Commission Budget Workshop, July 14th, 2025 to order. If I could ask everyone to please silence their cell phones or put them on vibrate during the meeting, that would be great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Fezzik.
Here.
Commissioner Perkins.
Here.
Commissioner Sigerson-Eaton. Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Vice Mayor Fournier.
Here.
Mayor Harden.
Here, if I could ask everyone to please rise for the invocation, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, Father, give us wisdom to consider this budget for the city of Pompano Beach and do our best for all the residents and visitors herein. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Harrison, any changes to our agenda this morning?
No, sir.
Seeing none, can I get a motion approving the agenda as printed?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. That takes us up to our presentation of the citywide fiscal year 2026 recommended operating budget to the City Commission. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Waters. Very good.
Good morning, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Commission. I'm Joshua Waters, the city's budget director. Before I begin my presentation today, I'd like to thank the department directors and their staff for all the collaboration that went into creating this document before you, as well as the city manager and the assistant city managers for their leadership throughout the budget process. I'd also like to especially thank my staff in the budget office, Liliana Alvarez, Coron Grant, and our new intern, Luke, for their help in putting together the document, their long hours, their diligence they took to put this together. Our main objective today is to review the revenue and expenditure projections for the city's FY 2026 budget and to seek consensus on the budget, the millage rates, the fire assessment fees, and the 5-year capital improvement plan. So today we're going to cover the following: key budget highlights and pressures, expenditures and revenues for all funds. We'll dive a little deeper into the general fund and then review fire assessment fees and the proposed millage rates for fiscal 2026. So this is a slide we reviewed a couple of weeks ago, but I just wanted to reiterate a few points here. The city continues to experience significant non-discretionary budget pressures, and this really is the story of the FY 2026 budget. As you can see, there are required pension contribution increases in the budget, funding needed to meet employee contract obligations, and funding needed to implement phase 1 of the BSO compensation study. Despite these budget pressures, the proposed operating millage rate remains the same as fiscal year 2025, and the aggregate millage rate decreases slightly year over year. We do recommend an increase in the fire assessment fees to cover the rising costs of providing fire services, and we'll talk about this in a little more depth later on. And there is an increase in the budget for police services. This chart shows the breakdown of citywide revenue. The FY 2026 budget for all funds totals $463.5 million. And I'll go over each of these slides, starting with the ad valorem revenues, the blue piece. Ad valorem revenues have increased by $11.1 million, primarily due to property valuation increases. Non-ad valorem revenues increased by approximately $1 million, mostly due to revised utility service tax revenues. Licenses, permits, and assessments have increased by $9.4 million, primarily due to fire assessment fees adjustment to cover the rising costs of eligible fire expenditures, and by realigning building permit revenues to be closer to recent years' actuals. Intergovernmental revenues have increased by $5.9 million, largely due to budgeting for the state premium tax pass-through for firefighter and police pension costs, and an increase in shared local revenues of around $1.9 million. Charges for services have increased by 11.2, predominantly due to utilities and solid waste scheduled increases totaling $8.4 million and other adjustments that are done annually. Miscellaneous and transfers decreased by 1.5 as a net effect of an increase in interest earnings and a year-over-year reduction in capital funding due to scheduled capital improvement projects between FY25 and FY26. Other sources decreased by $70.7 million, mainly due to utility 2024 series bond projects, which were utilized to finance utility capital improvement projects, and a reduction in fund balance across various funds, predominantly allocated for citywide capital improvement projects. This slide shows expenditures by each fund. As you can see, the general fund comprises 53% of the citywide budget, or $244.1 million. Enterprise funds comprise a little less than a quarter of the budget, or $105.7 million. Special revenues funds are about 12% of our budget, and the remaining funds, internal service funds, debt service operating funds, and general capital funds combined are about 12% of our budget. This chart shows year-over-year comparisons of each fund type. You can see the general fund increases by a little over $20 million, largely driven by those non-discretionary increases we spoke about a little earlier and 2 weeks ago. Special revenue funds decrease by a little more than $9 million, largely because of a decrease in expenditures for the building permits fund. Enterprise funds decrease by $45.6 million, largely because of those utility bond proceeds that were budgeted for '25 for capital projects. Internal service funds are used to pay for services and goods that are provided by one department to other departments within the city on a cost reimbursement basis. The 2026 budget for most of these funds are very similar to the 2025 budget. There is a $1.1 million increase to the health insurance fund and risk management fund, largely due to annual adjustments of insurance premiums and claims. And the central services fund recommended budget increase mainly due to cleaning contracts for city facilities and of outsourcing for certain professional services. Special revenue funds. This slide shows the special revenue fund expenditures, the year-over-year comparison. The building permit fund declines due to a decrease in the transfer to the building capital improvement fund of around $12 million. Of this, $6 million was recorded as an expenditure in the operating fund and $6 million as a revenue in the capital fund. The transportation operating fund increases due to the necessary increase to pay for the community shuttle program and is fully offset by the Broward County surtax. The local law enforcement trust fund is being used to offset the cost associated with school resource officers, and the EMS fund increase is mostly associated with personnel costs. This slide, looking at the enterprise funds, this large decrease in the utility fund is associated with major utility improvement projects funded through utility bonds, $46 million, and the timing of capital improvement projects. The increase in the parking funds is mostly associated with the net effect of one-time adjustments related to capital projects, internal service charges, and contingency. And the increase in the solid waste fund is mostly associated with the increase with the forced service workers for nuisance abatement services that are provided in the 2026 budget, and anticipated adjustments to the hauling charges and equipment replacement. Looking at GeoBond debt service, there's no real change year over year for either the 2018 or the 2021 GeoBond debt service budget. We'll talk in more detail about the CIP later this morning, but you can see on this slide that the general capital fund expenditure budget does decrease by approximately $1.1 million. This slide details the budget pressures that we went over in the June presentation. Following the July valuation numbers that we received from the property appraiser, the allocation to the CRAs increased slightly, and the transfer to the general fund from the general fund to the EMS fund decreased slightly. Overall, however, the budget pressures still total $19.7 million, and these include increases necessary for the BSO contract, required contribution increases, employee compensation increases, tax increment financing for the CRAs, and increased costs for electricity and water for city facilities. There's also a $1 million placeholder for estimated debt service for lease financing of vehicles and equipment in the capital replacement plan. Also presented at the June workshop, this slide shows where general fund increases are going. Almost 80% is going toward public safety costs. Public safety includes the BSO contract, the BSO summer program, maintenance of public safety buildings, the fire department, code compliance, pension contributions, crossing guards, park rangers, homelessness program, and debt service for fire and EMS, as well as public safety CIP. This is the recommended general fund services budget totaling $244.1 million. You can still see where public safety comprises more than half of the general fund budget, with the police budget totaling $72.9 million. Of this, the police cost budget includes the budget not only for the BSO contract, but for the city's pension contribution, former City of Pompano Beach police officers, and other miscellaneous costs. For fire and EMS, the budget is a little less than a quarter of our general fund budget, with the remainder of public safety services totaling 3%. Of the other services supported through our general fund budget, the largest component is for support services. This totals $49.7 million, or 20%. Parks, Recreation, Cultural Affairs, and Tourism, 12% at $29.5 million. And Public Works, Facilities, and Engineering at $27.5 million, or 11%. This chart displays expenditures for fiscal 23 and 24, the fiscal 25 budget, and the fiscal 26 recommended budget. The total general fund budget for fiscal 26 is $244.1 million, an increase of $20.8 million. Personnel services increased by $9 million, primarily driven by an increase in pension contributions, and which includes the state's pass-through premium tax distribution. Operating and other expenses increased, largely driven by increases for police services, with additional increases for the CRA and utilities, maintenance, and other operating accounts. Capital expenses increased by $231,000 to account for one-time replacement of equipment to various departments. Debt service increased by $1 million. Again, this is the placeholder for debt service obligations for the replacement of capital equipment and vehicles, while transfers largely stays the same year over year. The next few slides provide additional detail for variances by department. All of this information is detailed in the budget publications, and we will discuss this later in more detail later this morning if you have questions on specific items. But we wanted to provide this in the PowerPoint presentation for the public. General government decreases primarily due to eliminating contracts with consultants, as well as the elimination of one position. The finance department increases by $216,000, mainly due to annual salary and benefit projections. Development services increase is due to standard salary and benefit increases, offset by a reduction in credit card fees. Code compliance decreases due to transferring funding for the nuisance abatement program. Police services increases largely because of that increase to the BSO contract. Fire increase is mainly due to personnel costs, including salaries and benefits and retirement. Public Works increases primarily due to pension costs and the allocation of internal service charges. Engineering decreases primarily due to keeping one vacant position unfilled. Facilities maintenance, there's a decrease here. That's mainly due to transferring costs associated for the city's electricity, water, and wastewater charges from facilities to a non-departmental account, since those charges are for citywide services, not just for that department. Parks and Recreation increases mainly due to salary and benefits projections. At the same time, there's one position being eliminated and two positions are being kept unfilled. The non-departmental account, this is the other half of that transfer. You see an increase in the non-departmental account here, largely due to transferring those costs associated with the city's electricity and water and wastewater bills from facilities to the non-departmental account. This slide shows non-ad valorem revenues, the historical trends. It's very similar to the one you saw in June. The only major difference relates to licenses and permits and assessments, specifically the fire assessment fee, which I'll detail more shortly. Just to go from the bottom to the top very quickly, non-ad valorem revenues, non-ad valorem taxes increased by $1 million, primarily because of adjustments in utility service taxes. Franchise and fire fees increased by $3.5 million from annual adjustments and rate adjustments to fire assessment fees, which are estimated to cover approximately 81% of eligible fire services. Intergovernmental revenues increased by $4.8 million, primarily due to state premium tax revenues for police and firefighter pension contributions. Charges for services increased by $1.5 million, largely due to anticipated revenue collection at golf course fees. Miscellaneous revenues and transfers increased by $873,000 due to annual adjustments. Conversely, if you see at the top, other revenue sources decreased by $1.1 million, reflecting the one-time nature of capital project transfer expenses. Oop, I skipped a page, sorry. This slide shows the proportion of each type of non-ad valorem revenues. As you can see, licenses, permits, and assessment comprise a little over a third of our revenues. Intergovernmental revenues are around 20%. Non-ad valorem taxes and other sources each comprise about 16%, with the remaining comprising about 15%. This is the slide I was talking about a few seconds ago. You can see the year-over-year changes to these non-ad valorem revenues. Most are increasing, with other sources decreasing slightly year over year. All right, now we'll talk about the fire assessment program. This slide shows fire expenditures and revenues for fiscal 2019 through 2026. Total expenditures are shown as the blue bar. Net revenues from the fire assessment fees are shown as the yellow bar, and the black line at the top shows the coverage ratio. Historically, the city has tried to maintain an average coverage ratio around 90%. You can see on this slide, there have been annual fluctuations in the coverage ratio, but after 2023, the coverage ratio starts to decline. This is largely due to increases in the total expenditures for the fire department, largely driven by those pension contributions. The FY25 estimated budget, the coverage ratio is around 77%. To ensure fire services remain fully supported, the budget includes an increase in the residential fire assessment fee. And as a result of this increase, we estimate that net revenues from the fire assessment fee would cover approximately 81% of expenditures in 2026. This table details the adopted fire assessment fees for fiscal 25 and the proposed assessment fees for 26. And I wanted to note that there is a change in this table from the June workshop that we showed you before. As you can see, for the recommended budget, we're recommending that the fire assessment fee for residential properties increase by $30 per unit. When I presented this to you in June, we showed a $20 per unit increase. For non-residential properties, the rate increases at the same percentage rate increase for residential properties, but these revenues are collected on a per square foot basis. In total, net revenue from the fire assessment fee is projected to grow from approximately $29 million to $32.3 million, or a $3.3 million increase. And of this growth, approximately $2.7 million is related to the fee increase. This chart compares the FY25 adopted fire assessment fees for single-family homes in Broward County municipalities. The green bar shows the FY25 adopted fire assessment fee for Pompano Beach, while the orange bar shows the city with the 2026 proposed rate. Assuming none of the other municipalities propose changes to their fire assessment fees, Pompano Beach would still remain near the median fire assessment fee for Broward County. Next, we'll discuss ad valorem revenues and proposed millage rates. On this slide, you can see the recommended operating millage rate for general operating and EMS remains the same from FY25. There is a decrease of 8.7% for both the GO Bond 2018 series and 2021 series associated with those rising valuation numbers. Overall, the aggregate millage rate decreases by 0.7%. This slide compares ad valorem revenues over a 4-year period beginning in FY23. Compared to 25, ad valorem revenues are projected to grow by $10.1 million. July valuation numbers from the Broward County property appraiser came in slightly higher than the preliminary numbers we presented in June. As a result, our projected ad valorem revenues increased by approximately $443,000 from what I showed you a couple of weeks ago. This chart shows the growth in the taxable value of properties in Pompano Beach from 2019 through 2026. This slide has been updated to reflect the July valuation numbers. The blue bar shows the historical taxable value, while the orange bar at the top illustrates the value of new construction. The green line displays year-over-year growth in taxable value. There was a marked increase in taxable value between 2022 and 2023, with growth rates slowing since 2023. Year over year, our valuation increased by approximately $2 billion, or 9.64%. This does include new construction of $401.4 million, an increase of 14.8%. This slide shows the general operating millage rate as the blue bar and the aggregate millage rate as the yellow bar since FY20. The operating millage rate remained constant between 2020 and 2022. In 23, the rate increased slightly to where it remained until FY25, when the rate decreased to 5.2443, which is the proposed rate for 2026. For 2026, the proposed operating millage rate will remain unchanged, while the aggregate millage rate is estimated to decrease by 0.7%. This slide shows how Pompano Beach's operating millage rate compares to other municipalities in Broward County. Assuming no other municipalities change their millage rates in 26, Pompano Beach's operating millage rate would remain below the median municipal rate in the county. And then finally, this slide details the next steps in the budget process. As you can see, we're right here, July 14th, the July Budget Workshop. The next date is July 22nd, where the Commission will consider and adopt the FY26 preliminary fire assessment fees resolution. On September 15th is the first of the two required TRIM budget hearings. And at September 15th, the Commission will hear from the public and then adopt the FY26 preliminary millage rates and budgets and adopt the final 2026 fire assessment fee resolution. The final public budget hearing is on September 22nd, where the Commission will adopt the final millage rates and budgets and the FY 2026 to 2030 CIP adoption in order to meet the legal requirement that the city have a budget prior to October 1. And with that, I will conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you for that. Excuse me. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Segerson-Eaton came in just after the presentation began. Thank you. At this point in time, do we have any questions of Mr. Waters on the presentation? Seeing none? Okay, then we will, let's see, it's
Mayor,
9.
I have one question.
Oh, okay, Vice.
Less on the presentation and more on the process. This year, we've moved to the Cultural Center from the 4th floor. Is that, I'm hoping it's because maybe we're going to be live streaming that to the public now, since we never did that in the past. Is that what we're doing, Kervin, or are we still not having this open for the public to view online?
Well, the meeting will be recorded. The reason for the move is to allow for more public access versus having it on the 4th floor of the city manager's conference room.
Okay. But we're still not live streaming this online for the public to view?
Not at this time.
Okay.
But the meeting will be recorded for those who would want to listen in to the conversation that took place during that meeting.
Thank you.
Very good. Further on the presentation? Seeing none, it's 9:25. We'll reconvene in the Cultural Center at, 5 minutes till 10. This meeting is in recess.
Recess.